Hi, everybody out there. Tim Flagler here with a another episode of Live on the Vise with Fly Tyer magazine. And tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to try to get through two flies. Both are caddis, and we're just going to kind of let people get on here and give it a few minutes before I get started tying. The first one I'm going to do anyway is probably one of the best. Geez, one of the best flies you can have in your fly box. It's a La Fontaine sparkle pupa. They just flat out work. Just really almost throughout the year. Anytime they're caddis, they work great. If they aren't taking bugs on the surface, absolutely try a caddis pupa, a La Fontaine. Well, really, honestly, one of the best patterns I think ever made. Yeah, and we're just gonna let some people sign on here, see if everything's working, and then we'll get started tying. For you, those of you tying along uh, with me here tonight, I think you have the materials list. I am going to be tying both patterns on a size 16 hook, so a little small. I've changed my camera as a result, and hopefully I won't run out of batteries with this camera. The other one can actually be plugged in. So, confirmed all video and audio is good. Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to get started, guys. What I have in the vise is it's a fulling mill 50 35085 black nickel nymph hook. Really nice looking hook, just the right length for me. Barbless, really like them. And for thread, I've got UTC 70 denier in brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my thread a little ways just in front of the halfway point on the shank and snip the tying thread off. I'm leaving this back here for a reason. We really want to keep that front part bare with this pattern. Now, there are a ton of ways you can tie a La Fontaine sparkle pupa, really just a whole bunch. This is my method. It's a little weird, so just kind of play along and it'll become apparent in a minute. What I have is this is spooled Antron in the color cream. Gary LaFontaine, if you read his Caddisfly book, he thought Antron just had magical qualities, and I absolutely agree with him. There's something about the shimmer, the texture that is just it's very lifelike, and I try to incorporate Antron into a lot of fly patterns. Anyway, I've got a pretty liberal like 2-inch long segment here. I'm going to find its midpoint and just get it tied in. No big deal. Let's start taking a few wraps rearward on the near side of the hook with this. Then bring the second clump down the far side of the hook and wrap. I'm actually going to check it. I really want to wrap all the way, way back to the start of the hook bend. Way back there. And then I'm going to take my thumbnail and kind of crunch that stuff, that Antron, to get it as much around the hook shank as I possibly can. Now, underneath this will end up being the bubble on the La Fontaine sparkle pupa, and underneath it I'm going to use some green rabbit fur dubbing. You can use whatever you want. I just saw my friend John Collins tied a sparkle pupa and actually did his kind of the wired version with wire that's inside tubing underneath. It looks really cool. He just posted that on Instagram not too long ago. So I'm just going to build up a small little dubbing noodle on my tying thread. I just want to cover this back section with it. This is going to be the underbody that kind of shines through the that cream Antron sheath. So just get that covered up. About like that, no big deal. Okay, the tricky part with this fly comes now. What I want to do is I want to take my tying thread. You know what, guys? I'm going to add just a little bit more dubbing. I want to cover up that space. I think it'd be okay without it, but might as well get it right. There we go. I feel a little better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tying thread and kind of candy cane, really open spiral wraps up to behind the hook eye. And then I get kind of either side of that antron. Doesn't want to behave here. And get everything pulled up front, okay? About like that. Pinch it tight. And I'm just going to do 2, 3, maybe 4 wraps right around there, okay? So you can see it's covering most all the way around the hook shank. And then what I'm going to do to inflate the bubble is I'm just going to carefully pull rearward about like that. And you can see it just inflates that sheath so it looks like a gas bubble that's around the body of the caddis, which I think is just really cool. And I'm going to snip the excess off close like that.
You can let people know they can ask questions.
Yeah, you guys can ask questions if you want to. Okay. So, got the body finished. That's kind of the hard part. Don't sweat it if it doesn't go all the way around. A lot of times you will have a space on the underneath, but that's just fine. As long as you get that little inflated bubble look, it's great. Some of the commercial ties, the bubble's huge. It almost closes down the hook gap, which I don't think is good. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about elk and deer hair, because we're going to use elk or deer hair on both the flies I'm tying tonight. This one's going to have an emergent wing. Now, I've done some things on Orvis about it, and just huge number of questions, and everybody wants to know what kind of deer or elk hair, what you're looking for whether it's an elk hair caddis or a fly like this, or the CDC in elk like I'm going to tie next. And I just have a few little things. I think there'll be some disagreement on this, but I don't know how many patches of deer and elk hair. It's really ridiculous. And what I've come down to now is the first thing I'm looking for on a patch of deer hair that's going to work for comparadons or any flies like this is the length of the deer hair. And I want it to be less than an inch. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't zoom out too much, but less than an inch in length from the base to the tip. The other thing that I want to look for is fairly even tips. This is a decent patch of deer hair right there. You can see the tips are fairly even. There's not a whole lot of black out at the tips. Another thing, you don't want these long, wispy black tips on it. You can see a few of them there. That's not bad. So this is a nice patch. This is a really good one. It's dark done, but you can see the tips are all very, very even, fairly short, dark tips. One of my favorite patches that I have. Now, those are both deer hair. So I've heard all sorts of things about where the hair comes from. Probably the most logical one that I heard is from an early season deer, a deer that's harvested in the fall, and that the best material comes from straight down the middle of their spine, so that hair down the middle of their back, and it kind of makes sense. The earlier season would be less hollow, and it would work better. Now, this is elk. This is really good premium elk from Colorado, but you can see it's a good bit coarser than the deer hair. The tips don't align quite as much, but still very nice. Incidentally, the stuff that I showed you, the really nice stuff, is from Wapsie, and they sell it as deer hair short / fine. And I've just had a ton of luck tying with this stuff. So
We've got a couple of questions.
okay,
Chris Saunders, when do you fish these flies?
yeah, for Chris Saunders, I fish these flies whenever I have a feeling that fish are taking caddis. Even if I'm not seeing them take caddis on the surface of the water, but if it's, this time of year in the afternoon, you can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be some caddis activity. You might not see it. They might not be duns on the water, but there very well could be pupa that are rising up from the bottom to become duns. And so really any time in the spring is caddis time as far as I'm concerned. I tend to go for caddis more in the afternoon is when I like to fish them, say, two till dark, something like that. But you can absolutely catch them in the morning as well.
And then the other question, where can you buy the Antron?
The Antron, either in yarn or dubbing form, is available just about anywhere. Any of the major manufacturers have it, even a lot of the minor ones. And have I looked at these flies underwater? They look slightly different than Gary LaFontaine. Yeah, they do look different than Gary's flies do. I think the same applies though, is that they will trap a bubble in there a lot of the times, little silver bubble, which looks really cool, and it's got the shimmer of the Antron. This is kind of slimmed down and neatened up a little bit, I got to say, from what Gary tied. Not to take away anything that he did, but uh, yeah, I kind of like him looking neat and trim. Also, a lot of people will snip just a little bit of one of these fibers, pull it back, and make a little kind of trailing shuck tail thing on the back. I prefer not to. I like the look without it. But let's get back to the deer hair for just a second. So nice short deer hair. I got some tan stuff here. It is so hard for me to describe how much deer hair or elk hair to take. It's you can't. It's nowhere near a pencil diameter. Um, it's just a small clump. And my advice for you guys would be err on the side of less rather than more. It's hard to be too sparse with these things, but it's very, very easy to have too many hairs, and it makes tie-in very difficult, and it it can also cause the hair to want to just spin around the hook shank really bad if you have too much. So I've put it in the hair stacker. I'm stacking the hair, and so I've got the tips pretty well aligned. Hope you can see them there. I cleaned out the butt ends. I'm going to pull these out by their tips. And so that's a nice little clump. That's right on the verge. I'm going to give that a go, but that may be a little too much. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to line up those tips right with the back edge of the hook. Okay. I'm going to take my tying scissors and I'm going to go right behind the guide and snip like that. Okay. Now you can see I'm back at the back edge of the guide. I'm going to counterclockwise spin my bobbin so it jumps rearward. I'm going to bring it up to here, 2 loose collecting wraps, and then I'm going to pull down tight. I'm going to keep squeezing those deer hair tips, and what I'm going to do is take my thread and drive it down through that deer hair or elk hair, whichever you choose. And I really, whenever I can, I like getting stuff tied in well after it's been trimmed. Okay, going back in and trimming anything just kind of gets a little sloppy. Excuse me. So we're looking pretty good. Those tips about the right length, about the right amount of hair, maybe a little much for me.
Wait, further on a question.
Yep. What do we got?
Todd asked if fished in the film below the surface or is it dry?
This fly can be fished just about anywhere. There is Gary LaFontaine tied a deep version, which usually has a bead on it, which is fished down low. But this thing, it's not really a floater. It will sink over time, and so you fish it probably an inch or two below the film most of the time. If you dress it up, put a little frog's fanny or a little floating on there, you can put it right in the film. And from what I understand, it depends on the species of caddis, but a lot of caddis, like the granums, Brachiocentrus, Brachiocentrus, that's it. Stay in the film as pupa for a long, long time. And they're extremely vulnerable then. And if you've ever seen a big granum hatch, there's a lot of feeding going on in the surface. And when you start seeing a lot of duns on the water, the fishing kind of slows down a little bit. I think they're mostly taking those pupa that are struggling to become adults. So what else do we have?
Chris, did you put a weighted bead in the middle?
No weighted bead. This one's designed to fish up an unweighted. If you're going to put a bead on it, it's generally put on the front, right behind the hook eye. Benefit of snipping the butt ends before the pinch wraps is that means that I get those butt ends snipped, and I don't have to trim them off after they've been tied in. I feel like a much neater. You can see how clean this head is on it already. Very few off fibers sticking out. And what's there, we're going to cover up with dubbing. The hook I'm using is a Fulling Mill 35085 nymph hook, black nickel finish, and as you can see, it's barbless, real sharp hooks. I like them a lot. I'm going to tilt my camera up just a little bit, guys. See if that works. There we go. Okay, the next part, just to finish the fly up, is just a little bit of dubbing. Again, rabbit fur. I'm using a brown. Don't need much here. Maybe a ½ inch long dubbing noodle on your tying thread. Very short, and keep it nice and thin. Again, err on the side of less as opposed to more. You just want to get those thread wraps covered up if you can. See how I did there. I might want just a teeny weeny bit more on there. There we go. That feels a little better. Get rid of those guys. And just a nice little whip finish, 3 or 4 turn. Sorry, I think that was 5. And then snip or cut your tying thread free. And that's it. That's the LaFontaine Sparkle Pupa. I know they can be a bit fussy to tie, and dealing with the elk or deer hair is always kind of a bit of a pain. Getting the bubble so it inflates is a little difficult. But guys, this fly is so worth having. It's ridiculous, and you can change the color of the wing, the front dubbing. I generally go with cream for the shuck, but that underbody that's green on this one, tan, cream colored, just kind of have everything depending on the bugs that are coming off. So let me see if I can answer a few questions.
I lost them. I replied to somebody and
we seem to have lost the questions. I hope we're still going. I'm sure.
Seth says they're still there. It's just a very future.
Oh, okay. So you guys can maybe start asking more questions because we lost that last batch. I'm going to switch over, take this guy out, and I'm going to put in another size 16 hook. this time it's another falling mill, but it's a dry fly hook. Again, barbless, black nickel. I just lost your feed, Joan.
You did?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on that monitor anymore.
Okay.
There you go. Back on. I'm not seeing any questions though.
Neither am I. Trying to figure it out.
Okay. Sorry guys, we're not seeing any of your questions come up, so I'm just going to go ahead and tie this one. Again, this is the done version of a caddis, and this pattern is called a CDC and elk. It's from a guy. If you haven't seen any of his videos or his tying site, the guy is one of the most amazing tyers out there. He's one of my tying heroes, really and truly. He one of the neatest, cleanest tyers. Every wrap is meaningful. Super cool to watch him tie. And this fly is so good. It's so simple, and I believe he gets full credit for it. I haven't heard otherwise. So CDC and elk. Got the hooks in my tying vise. I've traded my thread out. I'm using a tan UTC 70 denier, just a little bit lighter. Get it started behind the eye. Just leave a little bit of room. Take a few wraps rearward and snip off the tag. So right back to about the hook point. And I'm going to use CDC. This is rusty done, but you can use whatever color you want. Tan, green. Now the feather I'm going to use just a single one. Is one of these CDC feathers, one of the long ones, not the puff, okay? And again, this is a rusty dun color. I'm going to kind of pull everything down and just hold on to the very tip. This stuff is a little slippery, and so I saw Hans recommend this. You take a couple wraps here to get it bound down. You pull the tip up, 2 wraps under there. You've seen me do this before as well. And then bind that down. That way it's not coming out. And so I'm going to wind all the way back to the start of the hook bend and then forward right to about the, I don't know, probably 3/4 point. The rest of this fly is all wing.
So we've got some questions that came in.
I'll go ahead and ask. I can't see them, so.
Yeah, I know. Okay. What color combos do you do in this one?
This one, in terms of color combinations, can be just about anything. From, real light, a cream color wing, and a light body for a real light cat. Go dark gray, and then like a dun colored body. But there's so many caddis out there to me anyway. It seems that they're just tan. They're kind of a medium tan color. Adjust my hook up just a little bit. And so a lot of the ones that I carry are just kind of that. They're beige tan, and they seem to work pretty well. The green body one works well too. The cool part about the body of this fly, though, is what happens with this CDC. You don't want to twist it up too much. I'm going to get the end secured in my hackle pliers. Just a light little twist, not a whole lot. And then you start taking wraps with it. Again, I'm not super twisting it here, but watch what happens when I start working my way up the hook shank. There are not a lot of fibers coming off of it right there, but the further you work your way up, the fibers start kind of spinning off. You want to pull them back as you go, and keep on going till you reach your tying thread. I'm going to go a little bit further. Oh, maybe one more. See if I can sneak it in there. The stem's getting a little thick up there. I think I can get that anchored down. Okay. And get that snipped off. What's so cool, I've got a ton of fibers here, probably too many, but these things, these CDC fibers, look so much like the little filaments that come off the antennae and legs and stuff like that that come off a caddis pupa. It's ridiculous when you see them up close. So, and they kind of sit on the water surface and just wash around. It looks so natural when you see this thing floating on the water surface. Just an incredible pattern. And you can tie them quickly once you get on a roll because that body's so simple. Now, I have my choice of, again, deer hair. I have a fairly decent patch of deer hair. Right? It's a little lighter than the one I used before. Tips aren't too bad. Nice, even all the way around. And I'm guessing less than 3/4 of an inch in length.
And Tim, on this one, were you talking about who were you saying was your hero?
Hans Weilenmann.
Okay. Someone asked about who you were talking
Yeah,
about.
he's from the Netherlands, and just he doesn't tie on video that much anymore. I really wish he did. His videos were spectacular and going back quite a few years too. And real good camera work, the whole deal. I'm gonna grab another patch. That one got a little messed up. What I'm doing, guys, is I'm just snipping the deer hair free from the hide, right down at there, right by the hide, and then stripping out the under fur, the little fuzzies and weird stuff. Kind of getting the clump where I want it. So that's what it looks like before it goes in the stacker. Nice tips.
Someone else said, do you ever have patterns where you use scraps from a particular pattern?
No, not. I don't generally use scraps from other patterns that I can think of. I'm sure you could.
And what kind of floatant do you use?
In terms of floating, that's a great question on this one because CDC is real kind of fussy with what kind of floating you want to put on it. I'm a frogs fanny guy, a dry desiccant. I use it for all. I do use some liquid floatants, but the frogs fanny is to me is very friendly for most fly tying materials, including CDC. And this particular fly works really well for the frog with the frogs fanny. One of the things you want to do after you catch a fish is just put the fly in your fingertips and give it a real good rinsing in the water. Get that fish slime off of it. Maybe blot it dry with an Amadou patch or a drying patch, similar drying patch, just to get the excess water off. A piece of chamois will work. And then I just dust it up with the frog's fanny. And that seems to work really well.
And someone else needs to remind her what size hook are you using?
This is a size 16 hook, so fairly small. Yeah, these are 16, 14, and 18 are primarily what I tie them in. 16 is probably my favorite size for these. So I've got the hair all nice and stacked. You can see the nice, not a lot of black on the tips. Really good looking hair. Now, take just a little bit of that hair out of there. This is the wing on this is going to be a little different than we did on the pupa. Okay, so fairly similar technique, but just a little different. I'll try to describe it as we go along. What I'm going to do is on this one, I'm going to do the measure in the exact same way. Okay, I'm going to measure so the tips extend right to the back edge of the hook bend, okay? But on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tying scissors, a little hard to do with a big camera there, but, and snip right at the front edge of the hook eye, okay? And then just bring that back just a little bit, spin my bobbin counterclockwise, again to cord up the tying thread, uncord the tying thread, have it jump rearward, catch that a couple times around, and then I'm going to pull toward me. Okay, and that's what produces the little, caddis head on the fly, if you will. Gonna get that locked down. I may drive a wrap or two down through there. This keeps it from spinning, and then get down to bare hook shank. But what happened was when I brought that back just a little bit, now the tips on the adult extend just a little further back from the hook bend. And doing it that way helps me to be consistent with wing length. So again, I line it up, the tips with the back edge of the hook bend, and snip it off at the very front edge of the eye, and then move everything back just a little bit so my thread catches it right there. And that way I have fairly consistent wing length between flies. Okay. Take a few more wraps of tying thread right behind the hook eye.
You need to throw them in elk.
Again, on this one, you could use deer hair or elk. Doesn't matter. I'm kind of partial to deer. Anyway, I might want that head just a little further out on the eye, but not too much. That one will work. And I'm just going to take a few wraps. Seat the knot well. Real important to get that knot worked in there, and then keep a little pressure on it so when you snip it off, it snips off like that. I'm going to readjust my camera here just a little bit so you guys can see everything. This is a lot of fibers sticking off, but it's okay. You're going to lose some of them, even just in casting and getting bit off by all the fish you catch. A drop of head cement on these thread wraps, not a bad idea, but really not required. And that's Hans Weilenmann's CDC and elk. So between that LaFontaine Sparkle Pupa and the CDC and elk, you've got two major parts of any caddis hatch covered. The other two parts that haven't covered here, and maybe we'll cover in another live episode, are the larval stage, which cling to the rocks on the bottom, and then the spinner, which people forget about caddis spinners, but a real important part of the caddis hatch. The fly I just tied on YouTube was a spinner from AK Best, a really easy to tie, great caddis spinner, and the spinner fall is extremely important when it comes to fishing a caddis hatch. And most people just regard it. They'll leave that done on right through dark. And if you switched over to a spinner, you'd probably do a lot better. And
you're getting a lot of people saying thank you and great tie.
Okay.
And Randy's on and wants you to pump the trip for Patagonia next year. Randy said going next year you can join me by a round of dark beer and red stag.
One of the guys who's online right now is the guy who organizes my annual trip to Patagonia, which unfortunately we missed this year with the COVID-19 virus. It's absolutely killing me that I'm not down there. And I know the rest of the group, I know some of you guys are on. I really wish we were down there. And any of you out there that want to go, just let me know through Facebook or email. We are planning on going next year, next April, and We had such a good time last year. I think some of you maybe have seen some of the video from it. It's just amazing experience of a lifetime and a whole ton of fun. Guys,
we have somebody's comment.
Okay.
Mark Debbie, I tied along and didn't get much of a body before getting to the other fibers, so I ended up wrapping almost the whole feather before getting to the head. Do you think this is just because I used a smaller Cdc feather with too short fibers at the tips?
Yeah. So if you gotta you gotta look for those long CDC feathers on this one, guys. The longer the better. And even these big guys, I'll show you two of them. Not this isn't a CDC puff. So let me take that fly out of there. You can see this a little better. So this is one of those long CDC feathers, okay? And it just goes to about there. This is too short for doing one of these flies. You want one of these big guys. You know, the butt's here and goes that long. I mean, that's a fair bit of hook shank that you've got to cover to get from right at the start of the bend all the way up there. Not to the eye, but getting there pretty darn close. So yeah, the longer fibers definitely work better. And as you can see, this guy will float right in the film. That water is going to be right at about the bottom of the hook, and then these little guys just sort of wash around on the top of the water and look super natural. You get a little bit of float from the CDC or elk, and yeah, I mean from the deer hair or elk hair and the CDC. They all help the fly float.
And Seth wanted to know, what situation would you fish one of these over the other?
If there were fish, it's a good question. When do you fish the pupa? When do you fish a dun or an adult caddis like this? If there are fish up and rising, and really actively rising, and when trout are out after caddis, adults, they are, it's not a sippy rise generally. It's really aggressive, often with a tail splash. Often they kind of come at it sideways and go over top of the bug. So a real splashy, aggressive rise is on the duns. Whereas with the pupa, it's going to be much more of a kind of a bulgy, pushy, sippy rise on the water surface. Same with the spinners with caddis. So yeah, if they're really up in breaking water, go with this guy. Go with the CDC and elk. If it's a little more subtle, or you're not seeing any rises at all, and it's caddis season, go with that sparkle pupa. You basically can't go wrong. Any other questions? Or
No, I think Abby wanted to know about the elk hair.
Anyway, guys.
So here's the information you want to give.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. I'm happy we got through 2 tonight. Don't want to keep you guys too long, but just to let you know that next Wednesday night at 8 p.m., Drew's Chacon will be tying some saltwater patterns on Fly Tyer's Instagram page, so be sure to follow along on Instagram. Also, don't forget to upload your version of the flies we tied here tonight at the bottom of the live on the Vise webpage. For a chance to win a subscription to Fly Tyer magazine. Great magazine. My articles are in it every issue. Just a little plug there. The link is in the description. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks. Stay safe and healthy.